Well, good morning. How are you guys today? Welcome again to church. It is a privilege to be with you. It is an honor to be able to speak with you today. My name is CJ. I'm the Connections and Outreach Pastor here at Christian Community Church. And it's funny that every time I get up and I actually kind of run through what I'm going to speak about, I always almost slip and go back to like student ministry pastor because I've done it for so long, man. But it is awesome to be with you today. We are in the second week of our series on this book of Ruth. 2 weeks ago, we actually started out the series. Ryan talked about chapter 1 of the book of Ruth. And then last week, we took a little bit of a break while our presbyter, one of our presbyters, Dave Rodriguez, actually spoke, gave an awesome message. And we are back today. We are back in chapter 2, and so excited to share with you. And if you missed the first chapter, Ryan's message 2 weeks ago, I just want to give you a quick recap of kind of where we've been, so you can pick up and can jump right into this series and this book with us. Basically what we see is a picture of three main characters in this book of Ruth. And these three characters are characters that we see come to life as we read on in the chapters of this book. But we see these two main women is where the book starts, a woman named Ruth and a woman named Naomi. And then lastly, this character of Boaz, who we'll actually introduce and talk about today. And these characters, just to kind of give you a little, go back for just a minute, what we see is that we have Naomi and her husband Elimelech. And they are in Israel. They are stuck in a situation where there's a famine in the land, and they have to, for the sake of their family, move to Moab to really just find food and find resources in a safe place for them to live. And so they move to this new place in Moab. They're foreigners there. And what they do is they end up having two sons who get married to Ruth and Orpah, this other woman who they adopt into their family. And so what happens that we read in chapter 1 is some kind of tragic things happen in the life of their family. First, Elimelech, Naomi's husband, he actually passes away while they're in Moab. And then secondly, what we see is about 10 years later, there's actually even more tragedy. We don't know exactly what happens or how it happened from the biblical account, but we find that the two other husbands of Orpah and of Ruth, they also pass away. And so that's what kind of sets the stage for what's happening in this book of Ruth. What we see is Naomi suffering through the loss in many ways of her husband, but then also losing both of her sons, all in the course of about a 10 to 15 year period potentially. And so these women are all kind of stuck in this moment. They have they come to this place where they're like at a crossroads of their life. What do we do? How do we move forward? Where do we go from here? And Naomi begins to talk to her two daughters, Orpah and Ruth, and she says, you know what? I think I'm going to go back to my hometown. I think I'm going to go back to Bethlehem to be back in Israel with my people. And this is kind of where it picks up in chapter 1. And it says this, it says, when Naomi had her two daughters-in-law, she says this, go back, each of you, to your mother's home. May the Lord show you kindness as you have shown kindness to your dead husbands and to me. May the Lord grant that each of you will find rest in the home of another husband. What she's saying is that there's hopefully going to be a future for you. There's hopefully going to be something, but here, if you go with me back to my hometown, there's a chance that you may never get married, that you may never have a family, that this could be kind of the end for you. Like, we don't know exactly what it's going to look like if you go there, but there's way more risk. There's way more challenge if you go back to my hometown with me. And so she's kind of looking out as a mother-in-law and saying, all right, it's better for you if you go back to your mom's home because there's more chance for your future there. And so what happens is she says this to both of her daughters-in-law, and what we see is this picture. They start to cry and they start to weep, and because they love Naomi. They have seen something in this character of Naomi. They've seen the God of Israel. They've seen something special in her, and they say, I want to go with you. And what she says is, please just stay. Would you stay? And what happens for these two daughters is one of them, Orpah, in verse 14 of chapter 1 says this, that they wept aloud again, but then Orpah kissed her mother-in-law goodbye, but Ruth clung to her. So we see one daughter that says, okay, we can't blame her for leaving Naomi and saying it's fine for you to go, but I'm not going to go. She goes and she goes home, but Ruth holds on to her and says one of the most beautiful verses in the entire Bible, that Ruth replied, don't urge me to leave you or turn back from you. Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if even death separates you and me. And when Naomi realized that Ruth was determined to go with her, she stopped urging her. What do we see? We see a very hard set. Some of you guys are probably like that way. Sometimes I can be that way. When you get your mind set on something, Ruth said, I'm going to stick with you no matter what it takes, no matter what it looks like. And we see something beautiful happen there. But what happens is they end up going back to their hometown, and that's where we're picking up today. In this last verse of the first chapter, it says this, so Naomi returned, and Ruth the Moabite, her daughter-in-law with her, who returned from the country of Moab, and they came to Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest. So what we see is we see this picture of these women who go back, taking a chance, Ruth especially, not knowing what's going to happen in the future, and she goes back into this new place. And it's just at the perfect timing that God is beginning to do something, and he's beginning to put some things together, set the table for some miracles and some things to happen in both of their lives and both of their stories, even when it seems impossible. And I love this about our God. I love this about him because he does things that we can't see. We can't really even understand what he's doing, but we begin to get a picture when we trust him with our lives that he can do greater things than we can even imagine. He's a God of perfect timing. So they go back in at the right timing. And what we begin to see is in the midst of their pain and their tragedy, we see this character of Naomi at the very end as she's going back into town. She is so broken that she doesn't even want to be called by her name anymore. She is so at a loss of losing a husband. And in that culture, if you're a single woman without a male protector at that time, it was almost like, in some ways, a death inside. It was a place where you don't know what's going to come next. You don't know if you have a place to live. You don't know if you have any financial security, whatever it was. She experiences this. And in verse 20 of chapter 1, she says, don't even call me Naomi anymore. She told them, call me Mara, because the Almighty has made my life very bitter. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi? The Lord has afflicted me. She's in the midst of the depths of the pain that we feel sometimes. She's feeling it in a way that maybe some of you have felt it after losing something in your life, maybe a friend, a family member, a relationship, a job, whatever. She is feeling the depths. I mean, to even say, don't even call me the same name is what you called me before. I mean, there's something significant going on in this story that we can kind of wrap our minds around. And when we begin to put ourselves in the shoes, it's like, okay, I get it. I felt some pain in my life before, but man, that is serious. And so Naomi goes, and what we begin to see is that even in the midst of this pain, that God is already starting to work. He's already starting to do something. He's starting to enter into the details of their life and their story. This is what I want to talk to you about today, which I'm so excited to share with you. And in chapter 2, verse 1 of Ruth, it says this, now Naomi had a relative of her husband's, a worthy man of the clan of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. There's not enough good things to be said about this guy, Boaz. What we know as we read this is that we see a picture of actually Jesus and how he is our Redeemer. And we begin to see this character of this man named Boaz. It says, the writer talks about him. He says he's a worthy man. He means a strong man of character and valor. Boaz was highly respected in the community. He was the kind of guy that you would want to work for if you were working at a job, the guy who would take care of his people, that was trusted, that was respected. Boaz was a man that others looked up to, one that was a shining light in that community. And what we know about this day and age for the Israelite people was this was a lawless time. This was the kind of time where people did whatever they felt was right. They went whatever way they felt was the right way to go. And there was a loss that they had felt with their relationship with God. So all over the place, there's sin running rampant, in many ways, kind of like the culture that we live in today. Another important point to make about Boaz was that he was of the clan of Elimelech. This is a huge thing that the author brings out over and over and over again. He says Boaz was a part of this clan of Elimelech. What that meant was that there was a hope that they are soon to discover that because there's a relative, someone who is actually a part of their family that was in this time, there was something special about this, that God had actually put in place earlier on to redeem them. And there's this principle of what we call the kinsman redeemer. It's presented for us in Deuteronomy chapter 25. Family members were basically to come to the rescue of other family members who were in trouble. That was part of what God had set up to protect his people. And it says this, if a wife was left a widow, she was to be cared for by the dead husband's brother. And if there was even to have children, they were to even have children, so the family name would continue. If land was sold during a crisis situation, if you lost your home, you lost your land, then the family was supposed to come together and purchase that land to give it back to you. Whoa, that's cool, right? These acts were to be voluntary by the next of kin, that the family was significant there. God had set something in place to begin to protect the widows and the orphans and the people that were left alone, the people that were in situations like Naomi and Ruth. If you just had a family member, a kinsman redeemer, a man that would come and that would step into the situation and actually help redeem the story of what was going on. And that's what we see as a picture of God, but also what we see in this picture of a man named Boaz. But I'll tell you, if there wasn't someone that was a kinsman redeemer, it was looked upon with great shame. Women who were in a place where they had lost a husband and they were left alone, in that culture, there was great shame that was placed upon their shoulders. They almost felt like a loss. They didn't know where to go or what to do. And that's what the weight that they're experiencing now. What we see in this story is that when others fail, Boaz would do the right thing. During this time, man, it was lawless. We begin to see that this character of Boaz come out in the text. In what we see in verse 4, it says, "And behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem and said to the reapers, 'The Lord be with you.' And they answered, 'The Lord bless you.'" We see this respect that the workers have for him. They see him and they're like, man, we respect the God in you. They saw something. Many of you guys, when you think about your boss, you're like, man, I don't really totally respect them and what's going on. But man, everyone that worked for him saw good in him. There's something about this character of Boaz that was really special. He was a Christian businessman, but he cared what the Lord thought. And so while Naomi and Ruth are in this hopeless situation, feeling like everything in life is impossible, Naomi's not even wanting to be called by her name anymore. She is totally lost, totally broken, doesn't know where she's going. And Ruth, as this character, what does she do? She does something special. It says this in verse 2, "And Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, 'Let me go to the field and glean among the ears of grain after him in whose sight I shall find favor.' And she said to her, 'Go, my daughter.' So she set out and went and gleaned in the field after the reapers. And she happened to come to the part of the field belonging to Boaz, who is the clan of Elimelech." So she just starts walking So just imagine if you just went and you just started walking around the neighborhood and you find yourself, the Lord begins to line up these details, these small details that begin to make a big deal later on in life. And she just starts walking through these different fields. And then by random chance on a normal day, she ends up landing in this field of a man named Boaz, who happened to be a distant relative who actually had the chance to come and be a redeemer, one that would come and claim her and rescue her and Naomi and bring them out of poverty and out of the impossible things and begin to breathe life into their story and their life again. And so she just happens to do that. And what we see, there's a few things we learn about Ruth is she's humble enough to go and glean. She doesn't just stop in the midst of the pain and the suffering of losing a husband and say, I can't go forward anymore. Don't even call me by my name anymore. She says, I'm going to go keep moving. And she's humble enough to go and glean, which says something. She's also courageous in the sense that to go into a strange field in this time was a dangerous endeavor. It was something that most people would not want to do. If you were a single woman in a foreigner in a strange land, in a man's field in the middle of nowhere, you are vulnerable to attack, to assault, to whatever it is, ridicule. I mean, this is not an easy thing for her to do, but she says, I'm going to do it anyway. Because she knows that she has to do something. She has to keep moving forward. And in Deuteronomy chapter 24, another one of the things that God had set up, which was beautiful, to help the people, says this God was instructing the Israelite people. He said, when you reap your harvest in your field and forget a sheaf in the field, you shall not go back to get it. It shall be for the sojourner, the fatherless, and the widow, that the Lord your God may bless you in the work of your hands. When you beat your olive trees, you shall not go over them again. It shall be for the sojourner, the fatherless, and the widow. When you gather the grapes of your vineyard, you shall not strip it afterwards. It shall be for the sojourner, the fatherless, and the widow. You shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt. Therefore, I commanded you to do this. So God sets up this stage to remind the Israelites that you were slaves at one time. Don't forget what happened to you when you were in a foreign land and you were poor and you had nothing. So set it up into your life where you begin to take the blessings and things that I've given you, that you can use those blessings to be a blessing to other people. Like, don't forget that. Don't take it all. Leave some behind for the people who need it and the people that were like you. Don't forget what I've done. And for some of us, that's the challenge, is that it's easy to forget what he's done in the past, and then you kind of hold on to it and leave it there. So what happens is she goes to this field belonging to Boaz, and we begin to see something happen here. God's plan was working out perfectly. There's something special that was in the mix. It was happening in this moment. In his timing, it wasn't random that she ended up finding this field. It wasn't random. God was working in his timing, in his plans, in his perfect timing the whole way to redeem this story. And I want to tell you something about details today. God is a God of detail. He's the one that sees things in ways that we can't see. And we see details in so many different things on this planet. We see him in the creation of outside, the sunrise and the sunset. We see something wild about these things. The stars, the animals of all types, our body and the millions of cells that are going on, our brain connecting dots, that when my head it tells in my brain, my hand to move, I can move, that we can sit there actually level and not fall over while we're walking. There's so many details of what God has done in us that we can celebrate and look at and say, wow, you are a God of detail. And we miss all the details. They're everywhere, all over the place, of things that God is doing on our behalf, bringing together so that he can show us that he loves us. We see the details in the complexity of humanity, that we have free will. Nobody made us come today. I mean, that we have the choice to choose him or to walk away from him. He didn't force us. He's a gentleman of a God who loves us and pursues our hearts but doesn't make us do anything. We see his details in that. We see the details in our emotions, in our ideas, in our dreams. Did anyone choose the dreams? Did anyone choose the emotion? These are things that God placed in you, the details of, because he said, I love you and I want you to have complexity to who you are. And it's amazing to me to see the details. We see the details in his timing. He came at a point in history that was perfect to redeem us. When Jesus showed up on the scene, it was the perfect time in history, you guys, to come and to rescue us and to begin to give us a second chance so that we could be sitting in this place together. That he knew the details. He's a God of details. He's a God of timing. He understands those things because he sees a perspective that we can't see. And then also, he's a God of details in the amazing fact that this Bible that we call our home, our compass, was written by over 40 different people with different stories and different things that had happened, and it all came together so seamlessly, so clearly in a way that communicated his heart. That's beautiful. He's a God of the details. And that's the thing that we see in this story of Ruth and Naomi, that he's beginning to work into the details of their lives in ways that they couldn't see in the moment, but they began to understand later on what was going on. And so Boaz in verse 5 says this. He said, ask the overseer of his harvesters, who does that young woman belong to? This is a new face on the scene. And the overseer replied, she is the Moabite woman who came back from Moab with Naomi. She said, please let me glean. So Ruth says, please let me glean and gather among the sheaves behind the harvesters. She came into the field and has remained here from morning till now, except for a short rest in the shelter. She's working hard. She is doing a great job. She's doing everything she can to get every little speck that she can glean for Naomi. And so Boaz said to Ruth, my daughter, listen to me. Don't go and glean in another field, and don't go away from here. Stay here with the woman who work for me. Watch the field where the men are harvesting and follow along after the woman. I have told the men not to lay a hand on you. And whenever you are thirsty, go and get a drink from the water jars, and men have filled. And at this, she bowed down with her face to the ground. She realizes what's going on in the situation. That there's a man who has no reason to support her, to protect her, to take care of her, to keep her safe. No reason. He has no real, nothing's on the line for him, but he does it anyway. And so she gets on her knees and she just says, thank you. Like, this is what she says, why have I found such favor in your eyes that you would notice me, a foreigner? Boaz replied, I've been told all about what you've done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband, how you left your father and mother and your homeland and came to live with the people you did not know before. May the Lord repay you for what you have done. May you be richly rewarded by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge. She says, may I continue to find favor in your eyes, my Lord. There's something humble about that. She's working hard, and God sees and meets her in the details of her life. I love this. So what do we see happening? We see one is that when we surrender our lives to God's, the details and the timing, we begin to see a protection that comes over Ruth's life, a protection that wasn't there before. Protection in this character of Boaz, it also kind of it reflects the details of our God, how he loves us, and he begins, when we enter into a relationship with him, to protect us, to show us that he cares enough to keep us safe, to watch after us, to keep us under his wings. The second thing that we see in this character of Boaz in the relationship with Ruth is a provision. He tells his workers, leave a little extra behind for her. And we begin to see her being taken care of in a way that she needed someone to take care of. And then thirdly, we see favor that begins to come over her life as she trusts herself in the hands of God. And Boaz begins to be this picture of how Christ does that same things for us. I realized something yesterday. It may have been something small, I don't know, but it's something that just kind of hit me. And I began to think about how many times God has come through with his protection, with his provision and his favor for me over the course of my life. And I started thinking about that. And the one thing that hit me really hard was this. Over the course of the timeline of my life, I have probably only recognized about 10% of the time, maybe 15% of the times, where he has actually provided, when the times where he has actually done something to show me his favor. And the same thing with you guys. There's so many things that we don't even recognize that he's doing, and he's doing behind the scenes. And right now that he is doing just to hold our bodies together that are happening. And what I believe is that someday we're going to get to heaven. And at the end of the day, whether people are believers or not believers, they're going to meet Jesus. And I believe that what's going to happen is he's going to unveil this huge canvas of our life. And in this canvas, we're going to be able to see all of the things that he was doing from the very first breath that you breathed to the last breath that you had on this planet. That we're going to begin to see the little details of things that he was doing to actually save us, to protect us, to try to keep us safe throughout the course of our life, and things that we didn't even realize were there. And then all of a sudden, when we see that, I believe there's going to be this big canvas. And when we see it, there's going to be no choice for us but to fall to our knees and to say, Lord, even though I didn't believe it at first, wow, now I see all that you have done. And this is going to be this huge thing that will change the way that we see things. Right now, we may not see it all, but man, when we see it in heaven, it is going to blow us away. And no one, the atheist, the person that says, I don't even believe, to now, when they see that, they'll say, oh my gosh, I didn't realize, God. I had no idea what you've been doing this whole time. You love me in the details, that you showed up in those things, that if you wouldn't have showed up, I don't know what would have happened to me. You guys, there's probably hundreds, if not thousands of times where he came and he rescued you and he rescued me, and you didn't even know it happened. You had no clue that it was happening, that his love was reaching for you, protecting you, giving you his favor and his provision, and you just went through life and you didn't see it. I know there's so many times for me that that's been the case. But I'll tell you there's times where I have seen it. There's a moment when I was a kid and I was in a tree house at a kids camp, and I woke up. I was a sleepwalker. I don't know if any of you guys did sleepwalking when you were a kid, but man, I was a pro. And I'll tell you, I'm in this tree house, and I wake up in the middle of the, I don't wake up, I sleepwalk in the middle of the night. And the Lord, by his grace and in his mercy, wakes up my counselor as I am literally trying to open the hatch and climb down in the pitch black. And if that would have happened, the chances are significantly high that I would have fallen out of that treehouse and I may not be here today. But God was doing something. He was there in the details. And my guess is that he was there for you in some of those details. There was a moment for me when I came home not that long ago, a couple months ago, probably 6 months ago, and I looked, and on my mantle, there was a candle that one of my roommates was big into candles. If you guys are Bath and Body Works candle kind of people, he loves candles. And I was like, thank the Lord. You know, that's good. He can buy all the candles he wants. And he gets this candle, and he lights the candle and puts it all the way up on the mantle, not even thinking about it. And there's this piece of artwork that's right there. And what I came and I saw was this frame was melted. There was this place where the flame had come up and it had melted into this canvas. I mean, it was a miracle that this did not go up in flames. I would have been homeless. I don't know what would have happened with our roommates if anyone would have been there at the time, but it was a miracle. There was something that may have happened where God was working behind the scenes where it's like, whoa, God, I didn't even see it in the moment. Then later on, it's like, oh my gosh, like, what if I would have been without a home? It was so close. It was so close. Somewhere you protected me. I remember so many times, even when I was a college student, and I went home with a friend of mine, and went to meet this girl's family. She didn't have a car, and we went back, and as we're coming back through, she's giving me directions in this small little town to how to get to her place and get back, and we go through this little road closed except for local traffic area, and she's giving me directions, and when I come through, what happens is I get a ticket. I get a ticket because, supposedly, and I have no idea where I'm at. I'm telling the police officer, like, I am totally lost. She's telling me where to go. Will you give me some grace? And he's like, nope, sorry, flips me the ticket, no big deal. And afterwards, she says, I feel so terrible that I was the one telling you and guiding you where to go, and you got a ticket. It's my responsibility. And so she says, I want to take care of that for you. And so I'm like, oh, okay, awesome. I'm not going to say no to that if she wants to pay my ticket for me, even though it was her that really kind of was leading the way. And fast forward 6 months, and I'm sitting, it's a Good Friday weekend, and I get this knock on my door from my mom. She says, CJ, there's some police officers, some detectives here for you. And I'm like, what? Like, what's going on, And I come downstairs, and they say, are you Christopher Buchan? Yeah. There's a warrant out for your arrest. And I'm like, what? Like, for what? I'm not like that bad of a, what have I done? I don't know what's going on. And they're like, yeah, it's for an unpaid ticket from this little county in Ohio. And they're like, we got to take you in. We got to take you to jail. And so they literally handcuffed me. And they put me in the back of the cruiser, take me over to the New Albany police station. I get my mug shot and everything. And yeah, I know. And I'm there, and literally my dad, God, like, I don't know, by the favor and the provision of God and my dad, he calls 3 times to try to work out this misunderstanding. The first time he calls, somebody says, there's no way this is going to work out. Your son's going to jail for the weekend. We'll have court on Monday morning, Easter weekend. The second time he calls, same thing happens. Somebody's like, sorry, it's too late. We can't do anything about it. This is in another county. The third time he calls, persistent, gets another person, and the third time, the third person has enough say-so or whatever, or power to be able to make it happen where we could go and pay bail and then come to court. If it would have been 15 minutes later, people, 15 minutes later, if I would have been in the car on the way, I would have been in jail as a hardened criminal for the weekend, Easter weekend. But by the grace of God, man, somehow God was working in the details. It's the times where God's working in the details of things that you don't even think about. Remember times where I like doing stupid things. You pull out your phone while you're driving, and then all of a sudden, you start losing control, and then you get back, and it's like, whoa, God, like, whoa, did you do something? You protected me. There's so many times I could tell you hundreds of stories. We could share stories for hours of how God has provided for us. The question is, what is your number? What is the number of times that God has provided for you? We won't know until on this side of heaven. But I want to encourage you to begin to think about that. And then also the thousands of little things. Not just the big things, the little things. We were at Nate Pepper's graduation party. We brought some inflatables the other day, and man, literally it fit just perfectly. And we were joking. We were like, dude, it's just cool that God just does little things too. He's working in the little things and the big things. It's all there. And I'll say one of the hardest things to do is what Ruth did, to release the grasp on and surrender to the timing that he had, the control, to take this fist, it's a closed fist, and to open it. It was one of the hardest things to release the grasp on attempting to control our lives and our future, and to surrender into capable hands of a God who loves us fully and is committed to us and is a good father. To release our grasp on the future, or maybe expectations that have been put on our lives that we have kind of crippled us and held us back. Sometimes we cling so tight to those things. But Ruth is a beautiful picture. What did she do? She worked hard. She had a great attitude. She just chose in the midst of her challenges to move forward and to trust him, to place her life in his hands. I'll tell you, timing is everything. Timing, surrendering to that timing that God has takes patience. It takes emotional intelligence. It takes self-control. It takes insight and wisdom. It takes perspective, taking a step back. All things that we need help with. Nothing that we can just grasp on our own. It's things that we have to come to Jesus and say, Lord, help me. I can't do this timing thing on my own. I'm struggling with where I'm at right now in this process of life. I'm struggling with these things, but God, I need your help to come and be a redeemer of my story, of my past, of my future, everything to lead me forward. Today I have good news for you. Trust and surrender leads us in a direction. Surrendering to the timing, the details, that God is good, helps us to worry less, to know we have a provider, one who's good, who loves to give good gifts. Our anxiety can go down. Worry about the future when we trust our lives in his hands. And I love this. So today we need to surrender to the God of the details and the perfect timing. Today I want you to hear something. I want you to hear this. Whether you believe it or not, whether you see it or not, God is working behind the scenes for you. Loves you right now. Maybe hundreds of thousands of things that are happening just in this room of ways that God is doing things to help you, to show you his goodness, to show you his love, to rest in that weight of his goodness. He loves you wholly. Matthew chapter 7 says this, ask and it will be given to you, seek and you will find, knock and the door will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives, the one who seeks finds, and the one who knocks, the door will be open. Which of you, if your son asks for bread, will give him a stone, or if he asks for a fish, will give him a snake? If you then, though you are evil, know how to give good gifts to your kids, man, and what's it going to be like for your heavenly Father? It says, no, how much more will your Father in heaven give good gifts to those who ask him? He wants to meet you today. He wants to meet me today. And he wants to begin to give us good gifts in that timing. So I want to ask you again, what is your number? It's that number of what God has done. Our hope, my hope, is that what will happen is we'll begin to, when we see this big canvas of what God's done in our lives, we won't have to wait till we get to heaven where we meet God before we realize all that he's done for us. But instead, now, on this side of heaven, today, we can start leaning into the details and the timing of what he's doing in our stories. We'll begin to see some of the things that we had missed before. We'll begin to see the little things, and we'll begin to see the big things of what he's done, the people he's put into our lives. I was thinking about just Joyland back there and how God has used so many of you to influence the next generation, to love kids well, to the youth leaders who have loved people so well. We begin to see all the details of how he showed up in my middle school years. We begin to see the details of how he showed up when I got married and when I walked into this new season of life, and then we begin to notice, wow, God, you are so, so, so good. Today, I hope you walk out with a sense of reverence and honor. You would say somehow, just like Ruth did on her knees, thank you. You showed me this kind of love, God. As we finish this message, I want to make some challenges to us as a church. And the first challenge that I want to bring to you is this. If you've struggled to figure out the timing part in the details, I encourage you to start writing things down. Write down the moments where God shows up in your life, in the small things, in the big things, because you may need them someday. You might need them when you come into a situation like a Naomi or a Ruth, or you lose your job, or you lose a specific relationship, or something, some challenge happens. If you begin just to write those things down, then that will be a step, an asset, a tool for you in the future to begin to remember what he's done, to not forget. Second thing is this: maybe you need help surrendering to his timing. I'll tell you honestly, sometimes timing is the thing that kills us, right? It's like, God, I can't wait any longer. I don't want to wait any longer. It seems like so much. And what happens is that we see this canvas of our life, and what God does is he begins to just show us a little picture, just a little glimpse. And we say, all right, God, like, it's cool that you're showing me a glimpse, but man, I can't wait any longer, Lord. I need that job. I need the healing that I've been waiting for. And we've been waiting, like, Lord, just show me the picture. And the timing is so hard for us to surrender to the right timing, whenever that is, whatever that looks like, and to trust that the details he's working out, he's actually creating a masterpiece, a work of art over our lives that we're going to get to see someday, and it's going to blow our minds. But until then, we only see just dimly through what he is doing and what he's creating from our life and our story. And for some of us, it's hard because we're stuck in between. We're stuck in between the timing. We don't know what it's going to look like yet. We're still living like Ruth and Naomi. It's like, oh my gosh, is this ever going to work? Am I ever going to see it? And there begins to be hope, but we're still stuck in the middle. Maybe for some of us, we need help just trusting God in the midst of our current situation that we're in. I feel like we're stuck in an impossible place. The next one is, for some of you guys, you're kind of like where Naomi is at. Your attitude, the attitude that Naomi had, she was struggling so much with the process in between. And for some of us, I believe today, God wants to actually meet you in the attitude of just choosing to have a good attitude in the midst of the in-between, of these moments. Like Ruth goes and she just works so hard and she humbles herself and she keeps moving forward, and God begins to meet her in the midst of her just continuing to move, continuing to take a step at a time, and that's where he meets her. And for some of us, we just need faith that God is good and he's going to take care of us. That's what we need. That he's good, that he's actually creating something, a picture that is beautiful. Someday, we'll get this revelation of the picture that he's painted of our lives and the details. This is one of Jim Glover's most beautiful paintings, I think, is my favorite. Every year at his show. Yeah, can we a round of applause for Jim? Yeah. What we begin to see then as time goes on is the detail work. We see that just how beautiful it is what he was doing over the course of our entire life. That maybe we didn't notice before. Maybe it was a little blurry. Maybe it was covered. Maybe it was unclear. But then when we get to this place, at some point we will get to this place, whether it's when we meet Jesus or before, where we see, okay, God, I see the details. I see what's going on. And I see that even maybe when I didn't respond to when you're trying to protect me and provide for me, that you were there and you were trying to. You were giving your best effort, even when I was stubborn and when I wouldn't let you paint on the canvas, and when I wanted to hold the paintbrush and I said, no, I'm painting my picture, God. But he says, no, I can paint a better picture with your life. I can make you into something beautiful that has so much detail, so much fine tuning, so much love that you will see in the picture that I paint through your life. But we have to choose it, right? He gave us free will. No one's forcing us. That's beautiful. And so today, no matter where you're at, where you've been, what's happened in your past, whether you said no to his protection, his provision in the past, in his favor, I believe today we can enter into that. We can walk into that, and we can accept and give him the paintbrush. Say, Lord, I want you to begin to paint something beautiful for my life. If you guys would stand with me, we end the service. During this next song, I encourage you, if any of those things in this story resonate with your heart, to respond. For maybe some of us, it's just to give up that paintbrush. For some of us, it's those different things. Our attitude has been so poor about the future, where we're at, and it's kept us from moving forward. Maybe you've missed the details. Maybe you thought your number was like 5 things that God did for you, but you need to realize it was 10,000. Your number was a million over the course of your life. I don't know what it is, what that looks like, but I want to encourage you during this last song, maybe to turn to the person next to you if you're a husband and wife. There's going to be prayer minister, people that are going to be up on the 4 corners that are going to be willing to pray with you. Maybe it's just a friend that's next to you. And just begin to pray into this details and this timing thing, to surrender our lives to him, because he meets us in these moments, you guys. He meets us as family. So we're going to just sing this last song together, and then I'll come up and close the service.